What if history's most feared raiders were also among humanity's greatest explorers? What if the monsters haunting medieval Europe were misunderstood from beginning entirely? What if both stories were true at exactly the same time? For centuries, the name Viking inspired fear across Europe's vulnerable coastlines everywhere. Villages trembled whenever unfamiliar sails appeared along distant horizons unexpectedly one morning. The sea carried rumors, fear, and sometimes death itself toward them. Imagine a peaceful monastery standing quietly beside England's rugged northern coast today. Monks copied sacred texts while believing tomorrow would resemble every previous day. Nothing suggested history was approaching rapidly across the cold gray sea. Inside stone walls, prayers echoed softly through corridors scented by candlelight. Outside, waves rolled steadily against shorelines, unaware of impending violence ahead. Then someone spotted dark shapes emerging from the distant mist suddenly. Longships appeared like predators gliding silently across restless northern waters toward shore. Their dragon-headed prows seemed designed specifically to inspire terror immediately everywhere. Each stroke of the oars brought the strangers closer relentlessly today. Armed figures stood aboard, watching the coastline with unreadable expressions silently. They carried axes, swords, and reputations that would soon become legendary. Nobody knew their arrival would change European history for centuries afterward. Alarm bells suddenly shattered the morning calm throughout the monastery grounds completely. Fear spread faster than information as people rushed desperately for safety. The peaceful world they knew was disappearing before their eyes quickly. Flames, screams, and chaos soon followed the arrival of the strangers. Europe would remember this day as the beginning of a nightmare. But nightmares rarely tell the entire truth about those creating them. To medieval Europe, Vikings seemed like a force of destruction without limits. They arrived suddenly, struck quickly, and vanished before organized defenses responded. Stories of their attacks spread faster than the longships themselves afterward. Villages emptied at the sight of unfamiliar sails approaching coastlines rapidly. Parents gathered children while praying the strangers would pass peacefully instead. Often, those prayers went unanswered as raids erupted unexpectedly and violently. Monasteries became common targets because they stored wealth and lacked protection. Gold, silver, and valuables disappeared into ships heading back northward quickly. These attacks cemented the Viking image as ruthless raiders throughout Europe. Yet that image tells only part of a much larger story. To understand Vikings, we must travel far beyond the battlefields themselves. We must journey north into the world that created them originally. Scandinavia was beautiful, but beauty often came wrapped in hardship there. Mountains, forests, and icy seas challenged survival every single year relentlessly. Farming opportunities were limited compared to richer lands farther south. Long winters tested communities with shortages, isolation, and uncertainty constantly nearby. Survival demanded resilience, adaptability, and courage from an early age always. Children learned quickly that nature offered few second chances there. Young Vikings grew up hearing stories of distant lands beyond horizons. The sea represented danger, but also possibility unlike anything else available. Opportunity waited across waters where others saw only terrifying emptiness instead. For many Vikings, sailing was not merely adventure but necessity itself. The ocean became both highway and lifeline for ambitious generations afterward. And soon those generations would sail farther than anyone expected possible. The Viking secret was not strength alone, but extraordinary maritime technology too. Their longships became among the most remarkable vessels of the medieval world. Every plank reflected generations of experience battling northern seas successfully together. These ships were fast, flexible, and surprisingly advanced for their time. They could cross oceans yet still navigate shallow rivers effectively inland. Few rivals possessed vessels capable of such remarkable versatility then. Storms that terrified others became challenges Vikings learned to confront directly. Longships rode rough waves with confidence born from exceptional design principles. Their mobility provided strategic advantages that transformed warfare and exploration alike. Vikings could appear suddenly far from expected coastal locations unexpectedly. Rivers became pathways deep into territories once considered relatively safe. Communities often discovered Viking presence only when it was already nearby. The sea no longer acted as a barrier protecting distant regions. Instead, it became a road connecting Scandinavia with much wider worlds. Ambitious crews sailed into unknown waters seeking opportunity, wealth, and glory. European rulers struggled adapting defenses against enemies so remarkably mobile. Traditional strategies failed when attackers could strike almost anywhere suddenly. The Vikings reshaped military thinking through innovation as much as aggression. Navigation required skill, courage, and trust in knowledge past generations. Sailors studied stars, coastlines, currents, and weather with remarkable precision. Their journeys pushed beyond familiar maps into regions largely unexplored before. Every voyage carried risks capable of ending in disaster without warning, yet they continued sailing farther, driven by curiosity and necessity alike. And soon their ships would reach places few believed existed. If Vikings sought only loot, their journeys would have ended quickly. Yet they continued sailing toward horizons offering no guaranteed rewards whatsoever. Exploration became as important as raiding within Viking culture itself. They reached Iceland, a remote island surrounded by unforgiving northern waters. Few people viewed such isolated lands as attractive destinations then. Vikings saw possibility where others saw only hardship and uncertainty. Families established settlements despite volcanic terrain and challenging weather conditions. Their determination transformed distant islands into thriving communities gradually over time. These achievements required patience beyond the excitement of any successful raid. Then came Eric the Red, one of history's most famous exiles. Forced from Iceland, he searched farther west for new opportunities. His journey eventually led to Greenland, another unlikely destination successfully. Greenland challenged settlers with cold climates and difficult living conditions constantly. Even so, Viking communities survived there for generations remarkably long. Their willingness to settle distant frontiers distinguished them from ordinary raiders. But exploration did not stop at Greenland's frozen coasts either. Some sailors wondered what might exist even farther beyond the horizon. Curiosity pushed them into waters few Europeans had ever attempted crossing. Among those explorers was Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red. His voyage would become one of the most extraordinary journeys ever recorded. Ahead stretched uncertainty, danger, and possibilities impossible to imagine fully. Then land appeared where maps offered only blank and mysterious spaces. The Vikings had reached North America centuries before Columbus arrived there. Suddenly, the story of Vikings became far more complicated indeed. The land Vikings discovered became known as Vinland in later accounts. Forests, rivers, and resources offered possibilities unlike Greenland's harsher environment previously. For explorers, the discovery represented an extraordinary achievement beyond imagination itself. They walked lands unknown to most Europeans centuries before famous explorers arrived. Their ships had crossed immense distances using skill, courage, and determination. Such accomplishments challenged simplistic images of Vikings as mere raiders alone. Settlements were attempted, resources gathered, and opportunities carefully evaluated there. Exploration required planning and patience very different from quick military raids. Yet, despite these achievements, another reality remained impossible ignoring entirely. While some explored new worlds, others continued attacking vulnerable communities elsewhere. Europe still remembered burning villages more vividly than distant discoveries often. Fear leaves stronger impressions than achievements hidden beyond oceans usually. This contradiction sits at the center of the Viking story permanently. How can the same culture produce explorers and raiders simultaneously together? How should history judge people capable of both creation and destruction? Some Vikings sought wealth through trade, settlement, and exploration peacefully. Others pursued riches through violence whenever opportunities appeared profitable enough. Human motivations rarely fit neatly into simple categories or labels. Medieval Europeans naturally emphasized experiences shaped by fear and loss personally. Their chronicles portrayed Vikings primarily as enemies threatening civilization repeatedly. Those records would influence how future generations remembered Vikings profoundly. Yet every story changes depending on who gets to tell it. And that realization opens the door to an unexpected historical twist. The Vikings may not have been exactly what history remembers today. Here, the Viking story takes an unexpected and fascinating historical turn suddenly. Most surviving accounts about Vikings were not written by Vikings themselves. Instead, many came from people who suffered Viking attacks directly before. Monks, priests, and chroniclers documented raids that devastated their communities repeatedly. Their descriptions emphasized fear, destruction, and loss for understandable reasons. Few victims would portray attackers as complex or admirable figures fairly. Imagine your story written entirely by people harmed by your actions. What details might they highlight, and what might they ignore completely? Perspective shapes memory more powerfully than many people realize often. Vikings relied heavily on oral traditions rather than written records historically. Many of their own viewpoints disappeared long before historians arrived. As a result, one side of the story dominated historical narratives. Modern research reveals Vikings were far more diverse than stereotypes suggest. Some were traders connecting distant cultures through commerce and exchange. Others established settlements that evolved into lasting communities over generations. Many explored unfamiliar regions driven by curiosity rather than conquest alone. Of course, raiders existed too, and their violence was undeniably real. A complete understanding requires acknowledging every aspect of Viking society honestly. They cannot be reduced solely to heroes or villains without distortion. Human societies are rarely simple enough for such convenient categories anyway. The Viking world contained ambition, brutality, innovation, and resilience simultaneously together. Perhaps the real mystery is why we expected simplicity at all. History often becomes richer once myths give way to complexity gradually. And the deeper we look, the more surprising Vikings become. The Viking world extended far beyond battlefields, raids, and coastal attacks alone. Many Norsemen earned fortunes through trade rather than warfare or conquest. Commerce connected them with cultures separated by immense distances geographically. Their trade routes stretched across rivers, seas, and continents remarkably far. Viking merchants traveled through Eastern Europe toward wealthy southern markets regularly. Goods moved alongside ideas, languages, and cultural influences between societies. Furs, amber, iron, and crafted products exchanged hands across networks. In return came silver, luxury goods, and opportunities for prosperity. Trade often proved more sustainable than constant raiding over time economically. Some Vikings journeyed all the way to Constantinople, legendary capital city. There they encountered wealth beyond anything found in northern settlements. The city astonished travelers with its scale, sophistication, and grandeur. Viking adventurers interacted with people from vastly different cultures regularly. These encounters broadened horizons beyond traditional Scandinavian experiences significantly afterward. Exploration was not only geographical, it was cultural as well. Archaeologists continue uncovering evidence of Viking connections across distant regions today. Coins, jewelry, and artifacts reveal astonishing patterns of long-distance contact. Such discoveries challenge outdated assumptions about isolation during medieval centuries. Viking networks linked places many people assume were entirely disconnected then. Their influence reached farther than most contemporaries could have imagined beforehand. These achievements complicate the image of Vikings as simple raiders considerably. They were participants in an increasingly interconnected medieval world already emerging. Trade, travel, and curiosity shaped their legacy alongside warfare undeniably, and their impact would continue long after the Viking Age ended. Over time, many Vikings stopped raiding and started settling permanently instead. The same people once feared as invaders became neighbors and citizens. History rarely remains frozen. Societies evolve through unexpected transformations continually. Viking families cultivated land, raised children, and built stable communities. Their goals increasingly focused on prosperity rather than temporary plunder alone. Settlement offered security impossible to achieve through endless warfare consistently. Some Norse leaders forged alliances with rulers they once fought. Cooperation gradually replaced conflict in many regions across Europe eventually. Former enemies discovered mutual benefits through diplomacy and shared interests. Certain Viking descendants rose to positions of remarkable political influence later. Their identities shifted as generations adapted to new environments naturally. The line between conqueror and citizen became increasingly difficult distinguishing. One famous example emerged in Normandy, a region shaped by Norse settlers. Their descendants would later influence major events throughout European history profoundly. Viking heritage continued evolving long after traditional raids declined significantly. Towns flourished where temporary camps once stood beside rivers peacefully. Trade, agriculture, and governance replaced some earlier patterns of violence. Communities prospered through stability rather than fear and destruction alone. Cultural exchange blended Norse traditions with local customs across generations. Languages, laws, and identities gradually merged into something entirely new. The Viking legacy became woven into broader European civilization permanently afterward. Former outsiders transformed into participants shaping the societies around them. Their story demonstrates how identities can change dramatically through time. And perhaps that transformation is the most fascinating chapter yet. Centuries later, Vikings continue captivating imaginations more than many historical societies. Their stories blend adventure, danger, mystery, and discovery in powerful ways. Few cultures occupy such a unique place within popular imagination today. Yet popular images often differ dramatically from historical realities discovered later. Myths simplify people who were actually complex and multifaceted historically. Vikings became symbols rather than individuals shaped by specific circumstances originally. Archaeology continues revealing details challenging long-held assumptions about Viking society. New discoveries frequently add nuance to stories once considered settled. History grows richer whenever evidence replaces comfortable stereotypes gradually over time. Legends portray heroes and villains because simplicity makes stories easier. Reality rarely offers such clear divisions between good and evil. The Viking Age demonstrates that complexity often defines human history best. Viking sagas preserved memories blending fact, symbolism, and cultural values. These stories helped communities understand themselves and their shared heritage. Storytelling became another voyage through unknown territories of memory. Some Vikings explored oceans while others explored possibilities within changing societies. Their achievements and failures both contributed to their enduring fascination. We remember them because they embodied extremes of human experience vividly. Modern audiences still recognize courage, ambition, and risk within their journeys. At the same time, we acknowledge violence and suffering they caused. That tension keeps the Viking story relevant and endlessly debated. The horizon always represented something powerful within Viking culture deeply. Beyond it waited danger, opportunity, and answers to unanswered questions. And one final question remains before this story truly ends. So were Vikings explorers, or were they ruthless raiders above everything else? History tempts us towards simple answers because simplicity feels comfortable and satisfying. But the truth rarely cares about our desire for easy conclusions. Vikings were explorers who crossed oceans few others dared challenge successfully. They discovered lands, established settlements, and expanded humanity's geographical horizons significantly. Their voyages changed understanding of what was possible during medieval centuries. Yet they were also raiders responsible for violence, destruction, and fear. Villages burned because of them, and innocent people suffered greatly. Ignoring that reality would distort history just as much completely. The mistake is believing one identity must erase the other entirely. Human beings often contain contradictions that refuse neat categorization permanently. Vikings embodied both humanity's curiosity and its capacity for violence simultaneously. They left behind more than battles, treasures, and dramatic legends alone. Their legacy survives within cultures, languages, and historical transformations today. Entire regions still carry traces of Viking influence centuries afterward. Their descendants became rulers, merchants, farmers, and citizens across Europe. The raiders eventually became part of societies they once threatened. That transformation remains one of history's most remarkable ironies indeed. Perhaps the real question was never explorer or raider after all. Perhaps the question is why we expect people to be only one. History becomes clearer when we accept complexity rather than resist it. Vikings were explorers, raiders, traders, settlers, and dreamers at once. Their ships crossed oceans, but their stories crossed centuries far beyond. and that is why the world still remembers the Vikings today.